lights, properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, of the proper color being right. My windshields, properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It is supposed to be clean. It's not clean, but oh well. I'm gonna go down to my hood, and I always check to make sure that my hood is on tight. There's no intrusions, no holes, no obvious DOT infractions. My hood mirrors, properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. The glass is not cracked, bent, or broken on the other side. I'm going to come down to my lights and my lenses that go over the lights. Properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. The lenses aren't fogged over, which happens a lot in these trucks. Go down to my fog lights, same thing. Not cracked, bent, or broken. It's properly mounted, secured. The lenses are not fogged over. Go down to my license plate, properly mounted, secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken. And then I'm checking to see if the truck is leaning in either direction, indicating to me some sort of suspension issue. Okay, this truck is not leaning. And then finally we'll look underneath to make sure there's no oil, there's no antifreeze, there's no liquids coming down, transmission fluid, power steering fluid that is, right? And we're good to go. Just begin on A, on the right side of the vehicle. So I'm going to start right in with my alternator. My alternator is not cracked, bent, or broken. It's properly mounted, secured. It also is belt driven. And the belt itself, when I pull back on it, no more than 3/4 inch play. Okay. My 3 alternator wires here, they're not cut, frayed, or bent. Okay. And there is no illegal tape or corrosion or anything like that on it. I'm going to go down to my water pump. It's properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken.
Is it that thing right there?
Yep, right down in there. There it is. And it's not leaking. Okay, it's also belt driven, right? And that belt also should be no more than 3/4 inch play. And then my water hoses, okay, properly mounted, secured, no braces, bulges, or cuts, and they're in good working shape, right? Let's move over to the other side. Now, when I go to the other side, what Thomas was talking about is working in an orderly fashion. So we don't want you to bounce from part to part to part to part. You're bound to forget something. Work in a fashion where you're working from up to the bottom and group things together. Okay, so we'll start with the coolant reservoir. It's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It is not leaking. It's filled to the proper level. The caps are on tight, the overflow caps. Right? I'm going to go right to my oil, both the dipstick and the oil filler tube and the cap. The cap is on tight. It's properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. The tube is not leaking. It's in good working order. My dipstick, I'm going to pull it out, wipe it, put it back in, check it again, and make sure that the oil's at the proper operating level. It's properly mounted and secured. It's not cracked, bent, broken, and it's also not leaking. It's not cracked here. That often happens. You'll see corrosion here, and it'll crack. It could leak some oil, right? Now from there, I'm going straight into my compressor, and since I'm doing my compressor, I'm not going to forget about the compressor lines, right? So my compressor is properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It is not leaking. It's also gear driven. And also my compressor lines, properly mounted, secured, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and they're also not leaking air. Okay. Now right next to it is my power steering pump, and the hose is going to the pump and the gearbox. So
where's the gearbox?
Right here. So the power steering pump is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It's gear driven. It's also not leaking. Okay, now I'm going to do my 3 hoses. I'm grouping them together. When I'm doing this, I'm doing all the power steering parts in one shot. So you get it over with, it's done, you don't forget any part. So the hoses, properly mounted, secured, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. They're also not leaking. And then going right here to my power steering reservoir itself. The caps are on tight. It's properly mounted, secured. It's at the proper fill level. Also, it is not leaking, right? And from there, still on the power steering theme, the steering shaft, as I shake it back and forth here, it's no less than 10 degrees of play. And it's properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. All right. And then finally, to my power steering gearbox, it's properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It also is gear driven, and it's not leaking. Okay. It would be leaking from this seal right here or from a possible crack. All right, since I'm right here, staring right at me is that frame. Properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, no illegal welds. Right next to that, attached to the frame and down to my bump stock, is the mounts and the shock and the shock mounts. Properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. Okay, and it is not leaking. The mounts are also properly mounted, secured. So with that theme, I'm going down to the bump stop itself, and there's 3 parts down here. You have your U-bolts and saddle and the bump stop. I'm grouping those 3 together, and they're all properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. And then I'm going down to my leaf spring. All right, my leaf spring and my mounts. There's 1 there, and there's 2 in the back there.
Where's this?
Right down there. You see it? Nope. Nope.
Do you want to hold?
Right there. You see those mounts? Right
Yeah.
there. Those 2 mounts there, and then that mount right there.
Okay.
So they're all are properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and there's no leaf springs missing. Okay, that's an important part of it. And then at that point, I'm down to my 3-piece linkage system. My pitman arm, my drag length, and my tie rod that ties both your steer tires together. And they are secured by 3 castle nuts, 1, 2, and 3, and 3 cotter pins. So they're all properly mounted and secured. I want you guys to remember and say it this way, because too many people say, my pitman arm, properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. My drag link, properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. My tie rod, properly. That's just too much. Okay, so pitman arm, drag link, tie rod, these parts are all together. It's part of your steering system. Later on, I will turn the wheel back and forth, and you can see how they work in conjunction with each other, right? And it'll make sense. It's like, oh shit, now I get it. So they're all properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. Now on to my brake parts, right? So my brake line, my ABS line, my air line, my ABS line, properly mounted, secured, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, and the air line is not leaking. Don't say they're both leaking, because the ABS is electric. Okay, you can group them together. Just remember, you got to say leaking just for the airline. Now you go to the brake chamber, properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and it's also not leaking. And then my push rod and my drag link. Okay, I'm sorry. my push rod and slack adjuster. Okay, and when you chalk your wheels, release the brakes in the cab, you can pull back on the slack adjuster, and it should not be more than 1 inch of play. Right? So you can keep the camera right there, and I'm going to reach down, and here is my brake drum all the way around, and then my brake pad, and there's another pad over here, and they're properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. And also there's no debris on the pad, there's no grease, there's no oil on the pad, indicating some sort of leaks somewhere else leaking onto the pad, and it's dangerous. And then I'm going to go to my
But the pad should have at least
1/4 inch, so no less than 1/4 inch on the pad itself. Okay, I forget what they start out at, but they're really beefy. They can keep going down. The slack adjuster adjusts now. All right, good looking out. All right, so the rim properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, and no illegal welds. Back in the day, they used to, owner-operators used to weld their wheels just to get another 10,000 out of them. It's really dangerous and shouldn't be done. So from there, I'm going to my inside wall and how it's properly seated to the rim. On the inside wall of the tire, there's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. There's no nails, and it's properly mounted, secured to the rim itself. Okay. And there's no leaks. Okay, there's no leaks in the tire itself. So from there, I'm going to the top of the tire where the tread is, and there should be no less than 4/32 of tread depth. They have to be virgin tires. They cannot be re-grooved, recapped, or retreaded, right? And there's no screws or nails, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts on the tread itself. And then I'm going to the outside wall, and it's the same thing, the same verbiage, right? Properly mounted, secured, no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, no nails, no screws, and it's also properly seated to the rim. Sometimes you see bubbles that bulge out right by the rim because of the pressure, and that's what you're really kind of looking for. Okay, and that's in a real pre-trip. You don't have to say that during your test, but that's what we're looking for when we're saying properly seated to the rim. It happens quite often. So, with that being said, I'm going to go to my outside of my rim. Again, no illegal welds, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. And then finally, the lug nuts here. No shiny threads on any of them. No rust trails coming down. You would see rust trails, and that would indicate to me that possibly one is loosening up. Then I'm going to my hub nuts themselves. They're properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. And then the hub seal. Whoops, you can pop that out. Sometimes it's a window where you can see in. This one is not. You can stick your finger in there and check to make sure there's enough oil in there. And then wherever the valve stem is, it's right there. The valve stem, you're going to finish up with that. On section A, the valve stem is properly mounted, secured, not cracked, bent, or broken. It's not leaking. And if you take a tire gauge, highly recommend keeping one in the front pocket or somewhere in your pockets. Pull it out. Tell Kelly, if you use a tire gauge, I can check the proper operating level of the tire itself. You'll be impressed. You're prepared, seriously. And that concludes section A.